Welcome everyone. In the last lesson we saw how and why everything from the existence of the universe to your own experience of it exists. I hope you were able to get a feel of closeness to your own self. I understand that there is still a lot of information left to cover before you can understand what I truly want to achieve with this series. If you did not understood fully the last lesson, I invite you to not worry too much about it. The lessons are meant for you to come back every time you need help and guidance until you develop the skills to be an independent, enlightened individual, or at least on the way to. The content will never change, but your perception of it will over time. A quick reminder, the goal of these lessons is not to replace the forms you already have in your life. Instead, I want to help people decide what forms are helping them in their life, embrace them, and thrive to the amelioration of the human species by letting the energy of love guide your decision to overcome challenges. I am working hard to make unification a reality, just to see what could happen if we could all work together. Together, we can achieve so much. This video, like the last one, is built with the principle of starting and closing a cycle. I will start where we left at lesson 1 and finish once we have covered everything that is necessary to proceed further with lesson 3. Alright, let's get to it. How reality creates itself out of cyclic fractal experiences. In lesson 1, we saw how and why out of nothing came something. In this lesson, I will cover the different aspects and implications of a reality built on cyclic fractal experiences. Bear with me. My teachings are formless, but to put into practice a formless theory, we have no choice but to put form and create the most basic reality, for example, isolating the first dimensions of existence of our own universe. The paradox here is that these dimensions are formless in nature, but we will use geometry in order to demonstrate an interpretation of their interactions. Geometry is a perfect tool of interpretation for some of the aspects of cyclic fractal experiences. Geometry teaches us that forms need a sort of stability, some sort of integrity to exist. In geometry, you measure the characteristics of a certain aspect of a closed form, such as the width between two walls of a rectangle or the diameter of a sphere, even the angle of a triangle, just to mention some examples. Remark that when we try to measure those characteristics, we need to isolate what we're trying to measure from the whole in order to create a lower, measurable dimension where other forms exist. We even create forms inside other forms in order to have a better measurement of the reference. As a result, this gives us the opportunity to measure and then create something bigger than what already exists. Its stability and integrity in existence will help other forms create something for themselves, like a foundation for creativity. It's the principle of creating something that sticks through existence. What we can learn here is dimensions exist because another supportive dimension under them have created their existence. The primordial energy that is permitting everything to exist can also be called love. Love is what a good mother usually gives you when times are hard, whatever the logical cause of the hard time is. In the case of existence, love is the primordial, unconditional energy that is flowing through everything that has ever experienced existence. What does this mean? If theory would be dimension 0, then practice would be dimension 1 or higher. A degree of separation from dimension 0 would create an emptiness, something missing that only characterizes dimension 1. Every form taking place in this dimension will then have to overcome the same degree of separation from the original, unconditional source. It will characterize the limits for all forms of experience in the dimension. Once again, if we take dimension 1 with its limitations, the only way for the forms to transcend themselves and get back to the source is to create what is necessary for them to support a higher dimension. That's the only way for the forms in the dimension of reference to feel connected, and that's the cycle that gave creation to your form. You need to reconnect to the source of existence, and if you do it correctly, a new higher dimension with new rules will be created as a byproduct where other forms will be able to experience existence. What is needed to fill the emptiness and transcend the limitations of the form? You need to recognize the dimensional limitations, such as space and time, for example. You need to recognize the limitations related to the baseline form for relative experience of existence, such as the human form or any other forms. You need to recognize the currently existing range of experiences available to our form and use them in order to create something unique for us. You need to recognize what experiences help us feel closer to ourselves, to our species, and the rest of the existence, and understand how they feel the separation from love. You need to realize that only us can experience and create according to our own unique perspective and focus on what you love to do. How can I prove all of that? Have you heard a picture equals 1,000 words? Well, 1,000 words also equals 1,000 words, and images are bound to form and the distorted interpretation of its viewer. What formless teachings try to change with that is to include other, more subtle ways of measurements. The feelings. Some feelings go through us and feels like they are hitting directly to the higher self and feels soothing to the soul. This is the multidimensionality that I want to add to our tools of measurement in order to have a better feeling of what's true. Some truths are universal, but other truth usually impacts the form individually and help them keep their authenticity. With formless teachings, I want to help individuals to find what's true for them while taking into account the universal truth that exists for our conditions. What we can create after that is solely our choice. Visual representation of the cycles of fractal experiences. This is what I call the primordial cross. It is in no means supposed to be taken as a literal primordial cross and really has only deep meaning for me. If there is any form I prefer than other forms, it would be this cross, because it symbolizes the essence of the formless teachings. There is possibly hundreds or thousands of forms like this one. Let me tell you why I find this form special. It represents balance, authenticity, creativity, and, most importantly, fractality. Balance is the principle of showing the same form, the same representation from all perspectives according to the reference of the outside influence, also called the observer. Balance helps the authenticity of the form in all aspects of the experience. Balance also teaches us that every form in the experience will try to find equilibrium to remain stable, and that causes repercussion with other forms of balance. Balance is important so other forms nearby can adapt and create something without the need to constantly try to redefine themselves. Authenticity is the principle of staying true when challenged. This is in relation to balance. When other forms are trying to find their balance, they will cause repercussions to the environment. How the form deals with it will ultimately testify to the stability of the challenged. It is important to keep in mind that, as the environment evolves and other forms of experiences take place, there is a limit to the stability a form can have. Creativity is the principle of creating something that inspires others to create. Creativity is an example of practice. It communicates to other forms what can be achieved with the same limitations. Fractality is the principle of creation through multiplication. Fractality can better be understood by the following. What have you done that works that you can keep on repeating in order to create something new? Understand that with a constant evolving environment, with the creation of newer and newer dimensions, forms cannot exist infinitely. Only existence and its foundations does. There is a need to recycle all the forms to create new ones. Once there is a new dimension with a potential for fractality, the potential dimension releases its dependency from the form of origin. It is now connected through the same primordial energy. The new dimension will exist and evolve with new forms, just to see what could happen. The cycle continues. Since all forms comes to an end, what I'm trying to teach is infinity, something timeless, something formless, and that will find its root in the forms that will come to exist. We say higher dimensions because we need to have a spatial point of reference. Up or down are simple and familiar to us. Please be reminded that theoretically, there is nothing like the concept of up or down. It is a practical metaphor that I will use when talking about dimensions to keep things organized in your mind. Dimensions ultimately exist in a space of their own. After all, they're dimensions. Higher dimensions are a byproduct, a result of a form finding balance in the lower dimension and replicating itself to a point of creating something new that exists in the new dimension. Big things are composed of small things, but it all depends on your frame of reference. This is a prime example for the variety of matter we are seeing today in the universe. What is matter after all? Forms that exist in a specific dimension, so stable that it has been replicated to be built upon. The creation of new dimensions also means new potential for the new forms to take place. The different limitations for finding balance are the new baseline for the creation of a new fractal experience. I hope you now have a better understanding and you can actually see everywhere around you, in all dimensions of your life, the cycles of fractal experiences in action. By isolating experiences in their respective dimensions, we can actually start to see better who we actually are and where we are. When we finally orient ourselves according to where we are, we can have a better vision to what is really missing from us. The goal is to create our own and unique form linking us to a higher dimension where our multidimensional form will live timelessly. In the next lesson, I will introduce you to the concepts of balance, harmony, and extremities. They are a crucial part for keeping alignment to yourself and the rest of existence. We will go into details for each concept and see why they are important for the physical manifestation, also known as creation, into a form. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you want more content like this one. I invite you to activate the notification bell to be notified when new content is available.